Hello everybody. So as you may know, this channel is called Beat the Denominator. I am trying to exceed monetary expansion, M2 money stock growth, euro dollar growth, dollars held abroad growth. I'm trying to exceed that in my investments. And so for that, of course, I am going to be interested in digital gold and getting access to that digital gold that is Bitcoin. But how does one access Bitcoin via shares, via stocks? Well, there's three different ways you can do it. One of them is you can access through an equity that owns Bitcoin, and of course Tesla owns a little bit of Bitcoin, Coinbase owns a little bit of Bitcoin. That's not going to be good enough as a pure play Bitcoin accumulation stock. MicroStrategy is the stock that I look at here when it comes to Bitcoin in an equity. Of course, it's the equity that owns the most Bitcoin at 250 plus thousand Bitcoin that they own. And MicroStrategy, how do they accumulate this Bitcoin? Well, they essentially dilute the shares to buy Bitcoin, but they dilute the shares in a smart way through convertible notes that will be converted to shares most likely, right, at later dates. That's the MicroStrategy strategy. I'll get to that in a second. Another strategy is to dilute your stock, dilute your shares to buy mining rigs and mining sites with electric access and then buy Bitcoin via the mining. And so that is what CleanSpark is doing. You could also talk about companies like Mara, who are going straight into buying Bitcoin. My favorite pick in those quote-unquote pure play Bitcoin miners and Bitcoin hodlers, my favorite pick in there is CleanSpark. And then the third way to do it could be companies that, yet again, they dilute their shares to buy rigs and to buy mining sites, but they sell the Bitcoin. They don't own the Bitcoin. So this is IREN. And that's an example of what they do. And so what they do here is even less correlated to the price of Bitcoin because they sell it. And of course, I stayed away from IREN for a very long time because they were not holding Bitcoin, and I didn't like that. I got into IREN recently because of the stock being dirt cheap, much cheaper than CleanSpark, if you ask me. And of course, if you also were to look between MicroStrategy, CleanSpark, and IREN, and you were just looking at statically a static view of these companies, you would find that MicroStrategy would be more expensive. You'd be like, okay, well, I'm paying more than 2 times a premium on the Bitcoin. That's the wrong way to look at it, obviously, because they are able to issue shares to buy Bitcoin and to issue debt at under 1% interest to buy Bitcoin. No households can do that. Very few companies can do that. You need to be a large, well-established, publicly traded company to do that. So let me get started first of all with MicroStrategy. So like I said, MicroStrategy, their strategy is to do whatever they can do. It's not always for dilution, right? Not always for convertible debt. Sometimes they want to pay off the debt. Sometimes they do straight new share issuance. But the goal of MicroStrategy when they grow their Bitcoin bag is, well, first of all, you have a little bit of synthetic mining. This was the original idea, but that idea weighs very little in the business now. But the original idea was, well, they were a software business, right? This is a storied company that has a long history in the business intelligence field. They were a software business. They turned the cash flow from the software business into Bitcoin, their cash on the balance sheet. That was the initial idea. And the second idea was to start borrowing money, and they would repay that money with the cash flows of the Bitcoin. And now, of course, MicroStrategy has long exceeded the cash flows from their business. So what they do now is they try to create a Bitcoin yield. And one of the better ways that they do create a Bitcoin yield is that they issue debt, convertible debt that will likely be chosen to be converted at later dates at a fixed price. And so that will be future dilution, but the key is that you're exchanging future dilution for Bitcoin today. And of course, Bitcoin being this static asset capped at 21 million, you are able to accumulate more Bitcoin today than how much you will dilute in the future. In other words, the dilution in the future is going to be less costly than the gains from the Bitcoin. And so the best way to look at it is they dilute the shares over the past 9 months. In the case of MicroStrategy, they diluted their shares by 10.6%. And remember, that is assuming that all of these shares will convert and will dilute, which they will, because assuredly the price of Bitcoin strategy, assuredly, no investment advice, but the price of Bitcoin strategy will likely be higher than, say, 204 in 2032, NFA, of course. But yes, if that were to be the case, they would decide to convert the debt, right? The bondholders. So assuming everything is going to dilute eventually, you would get 10% dilution, 10.6% future dilution. But yet today you're growing the Bitcoin by 29%. So you dilute less fast than you grow the Bitcoin. And one of the key reasons why they can do that is because buying Bitcoin is less quote unquote risky. Again, no financial advice, but it is less risky than owning equipment, mining equipment, running mining equipment, and owning mining equipment is a risky business because the value of the mining equipment will obviously be tied to the value of the Bitcoin, but also to the difficulty on the network and the fees on the network. And with a lot of people moving to ETFs right now and accumulating their Bitcoin through ETFs, you have less fees on the network, so it's a tough business. And then with Bitcoin being sleepy between 60 and 70K for the past 4 or 5 months, Bitcoin has been asleep. This is also mining is also a business where you maybe begin to run out of time if Bitcoin doesn't go up soon. And so this is why my position in miners is actually much smaller than my position in Bitcoin proper and my position in MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy has been doing so well that I now have more MicroStrategy than Bitcoin proper, which is pretty crazy if you ask me. I think MicroStrategy perhaps has the best strategy of them all. No investment advice again. So again, these miners, whether it's CleanSpark or it's IREN, you better hope that Bitcoin goes up really soon. And I'm getting impatient here. I think everybody's waiting for the election, the U.S. election, and if the U.S. election goes the pro-crypto way, well, I think Bitcoin could go up, and a lot of people are calling for that in the Bitcoin community. Anyways, a lot of things are not happening in the U.S. right now until the election is over, and we know who's going to be the leadership for the next 4 years. But let me look at the numbers, and tell you the difficulty of Bitcoin mining. So I'm first going to go through power access, and then I'll do a brief commentary on the value of the rigs, the value of the computing equipment. So in the case of CleanSpark, I've gone back and forth as to how do I value the real estate? And I've come to the conclusion that valuing the real estate is not really the way to go when you value a Bitcoin miner, because really the value of the land that they own, where they mine the Bitcoin, the property that they have, the value is the access to those megawatt hours. And based on what CleanSpark has paid a recent acquisition, I am valuing an access to 1 megawatt hour instant, right, of power. I'm valuing that access to 1 megawatt hour at $300,000. And industrial access is what I mean, right? So access to cheap megawatt hour, that is the value. So $300 million per megawatt hour, they have access, or they will, right? But I'm counting it as done already. That's 732 megawatt hours times 300,000. And so the cost of their real estate as viewed through the lens of access to cheap megawatts is 220 million. And I consider access to this power to be an appreciating asset in the age of AI. I think these contracts, these mining facilities, they will go up in value, I think, because of the quest for more power, and that you will see that's a much bigger thesis. The value of that power access is a much bigger thesis for IREN. We'll get to IREN in a second. Now, what else does CleanSpark have? Well, they have mining rigs, and so if you remember my last video on mining rigs, you may see that I've assigned a lower amount, quite a much lower amount right now on the value of the mining rigs. I believe CleanSpark, just the back of a napkin math, they have $522 million worth of mining equipment. And why is that? Because right now, these miners, there's futures contracts, and right now there's a sell going on. There's a major sell on these miners. The Bitcoin price is not where it needs to be, and a lot of miners are losing a lot of money. And it's only $18.9 per terahash, and so of course there's a million terahash in exahash. So what do you see? What is the value of these rigs? It's 522 million. So you do 27.6 million exahashes times 18.9, and that's 522 million of mining rigs. I keep track of that. That's the leading miner, of course, right? And ask yourself the question, what would the cost of these miners be if Bitcoin was at 120K? Well, it would be much higher than that. These miners would cost more money because, of course, the value of Bitcoin has gone up. The miners are the cost of the miners, the cost of the equipment is correlated. It's correlated to the value of Bitcoin. And of course, in the kind of CleanSpark, they also hodl, i.e. they own Bitcoin. They own 7,558 Bitcoin, and that's worth 476 million right now. So the tangible assets, what I would argue is the value of the assets, theoretical, right? If you were to sell them today, is $1.2 billion is the value, and the enterprise value. So the enterprise value, of course, removes the cash and adds the debt. So the enterprise value, so that includes the cash and the balance sheet. Same for IREN. When I get to that in a second, is 2.19 billion, which means that the adjusted enterprise value, i.e. the enterprise value, if I remove all of this value, right, all of these valuable components that are sellable, I get 972 million is the adjusted enterprise value. And they mined over the past, trailing 12 months, they mined 7,000 Bitcoins. Okay, that's a lot. That's 440 million. That's worth mentioning that, they're mining less now that there has been the halving, but they're also expanding quite a bit. They're planning major expansion. So I'm assuming, for the sake of ease of making this video, I'm assuming that they're going to keep making about 7,000 because they're expanding beyond 50 exahash. So assuming that'd be 440 million, so 2x times more EV. But of course, the key here is how much money are you making through this 440 million? Well, how are they paying for that electricity, for the cost of operation? Are they paying for it through dilution? A lot of dilution is happening. They're paying for that cost a lot through dilution because they are not selling the Bitcoin. They only sold 2 Bitcoin in the last report. So they're hodling the Bitcoin. You're hodling the Bitcoin through that dilution. That's how you're paying for it. Miners like CleanSpark, they need Bitcoin to go up fast, because otherwise they're going to keep draining money. This is the season. This is the fourth quarter of 2024 is starting, and this is the season where I think the thesis on miners will either be made or the thesis will break. Bitcoin needs to go up, and notice how this is not a risk that you have in MicroStrategy. You don't have that risk in MicroStrategy because, first of all, the debt is due way later, right? I mean, the bulk of it is in the late 2030s, 2020s, early 2040s, so they don't have to worry about that now. Time is not running against MicroStrategy. Time is running against CleanSpark, and of course, when you borrow money to just buy Bitcoin, you borrow money i.e. borrowing money is the same as shorting the US dollar. Borrowing money is shorting the US dollar. So you're shorting the US dollar to buy an appreciating asset It's a simple business model. Here, through the dilution, you're shorting the US dollar to buy Bitcoin miners, which you will then operate to win Bitcoin via the allocation of new Bitcoins, via the solving of the hash algorithm. Well, that's a risky bet because you have this new layer of complexity, which is the rigs, operating the rigs, the value of the rigs. I mean, we saw for CleanSpark they were down a little bit because of the last hurricane that happened in the south. So operation is a tough business. A lot of things can go wrong. And if you add to that the correlation to the value of Bitcoin itself, you understand why a company like IREN has decided to not hodl Bitcoin. They do not keep Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And frankly, valuing IREN is very tough. The last time I valued it, I found it to be extremely undervalued, and I still find it extremely undervalued. But no investment advice. But I'm not sure how the market will recognize that. I'm not sure if the market sees it the way I see it. So you see, they have 2,310 megawatt hour of grid connected power secured, but there's a lot of development for them to do to actually exploit that power. I am being very generous. I'm still granting them a $300,000 per megawatt hour of access, because I believe eventually they will use that power. Eventually it will be connected, and the connection can be quote unquote light. Like, there's easier ways to connect Bitcoin miners than there are to connect, say, a full data center with all of the redundancy needed for a data center. You don't need all of that hardware when you just try to connect Bitcoin miners, which is why I'm assuming this is going to be fairly easy for them to connect his 2.3 gigawatts. So 2.3 gigawatts for 2,310 megawatt hours at 300,000 of megawatt hour for the cost of that access. That's 693 million of power access is what I'm valuing it at. I may be very generous on that one. I'm fully realizing that their Childress plant, they're at 4.3 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay, that's just one example, but generally they are pretty cheap as far as the access to that power, right? Around 5 cents. So they are quite competitive, and they've already funded their miners. They haven't set them up, all of them, but they've already funded them, so they're fully funded to 30 exahash. And again, I'm using the same price per terahash of $18.9. So 30 million times 18.9, that is $567 million of mining rigs, which I'm adding to that. So that's my generous estimate of the value of their power access at 693. That's 567 million. And I didn't include the GPUs. They have a nascent GPU business, about $20 million of GPUs. I didn't include that. Perhaps I should have, but you'll see there's no point for me to include them, because if I just add the two of them, I'm getting 1260 of tangible asset value, saleable asset value, and their enterprise value is only 1.17 billion. And so what that means is that my adjusted enterprise value is minus 90 million, which is effectively, quote unquote, Wall Street paying us to own the stock. Wall Street must be seeing something in that stock, or it's just highly inefficient pricing of IREN. I think it's highly inefficient. How much Bitcoin, and again, negative enterprise value, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It is so rare when that happens that it tells me the value on the books. I'm overestimating something. I may be overestimating the value of a power access. I may be overestimating the value of the mining rigs. I mean, it's all very theoretical, right? If every single Bitcoin miner starts selling their mining rigs at the same time, what's going to happen to the value of the mining rigs, right? They're going to plummet. If every single Bitcoin miner is starting to sell their access to power to third-party companies, same, the cost of that access to power is also going to plummet. All of these values are quite theoretical nonetheless, and adjusted EV, when I remove all of this stuff of minus 90 million, that doesn't make any sense. These companies are tough to value. How much Bitcoin are they going to mine with that? Well, they're going to mine, about 7,500 a year, roughly, right? That'd be 472 million. I obviously cannot calculate any ratio on that, unlike for CleanSpark. And so the question is, are we gonna operate the mines, quote unquote, operate the mines through dilution? Well, we know IREN has had a lot of dilution, and so that's how they've paid for their operations, through that dilution. This is, of course, becoming acceptable because that is how MicroStrategy is generating a yield. MicroStrategy is generating a yield through dilution. I fundamentally believe analyzing miners or analyzing MicroStrategy, we have to analyze these companies not through the regular lens of dilution, but through the lens of the Bitcoin yield, of how much are you able to accumulate. Are you able to accumulate much faster when you dilute? Is your dilution accretive? This is, I think, very true for these companies. And I will conclude last with my HBO documentary comment here. So there's a documentary tonight, and this is likely the reason why Bitcoin is down right now. Is there's a documentary tonight on HBO, and I think it's a story of an old world company. They were bought by AT&T. It was a major failed merger. HBO, old world company, old world TV channel. They're losing to Netflix. They're losing to YouTube. They actually had pretty good shows back in the day, but they want you to tune in, and they've been advertising this, and they want you to tune in and watch at 8 p.m. watch ads. No, I'm joking. Watch the documentary, but there will be a lot of ads. Trust me, this is traditional TV. There's a lot of ads, and they call it Money Electric. I don't know. I don't like this name at all. This is not the first time this happens. This is not the first time documentaries are made about this, and FUD is made about this. And so, who will be Satoshi? Most people, the odds are they're not gonna come to like a real actionable insight or actionable conclusion. I think it really doesn't matter who that person is, as long as the Bitcoin of Nakamoto does not move, the network will not see any fear, is what I think. I don't believe these things can go viral anywhere like modern forms of communication go viral. So I'm not too worried, but that's why Bitcoin is down right now, and that's just the way it is. So anyways, this was not investment advice, no financial advice. This is just entertainment. Please like, please subscribe. Hoping you were entertained. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.